All right, welcome my friend to another episode of the Red Delta Project podcast. Matt Schifferly here, founder and author of several books including Grind Style Calisthenics, Smart Bodyweight Training. Today is another question and answer episode. Got some great questions in the queue here, including, can you get fat by eating too much protein? Can endurance athletes build muscle? And can, with age, how important is that whole mind-muscle connection thing, especially past 40 and 50 years of age? So let's kick it right off with the big one of, can you get fatter eating too much protein? Well, the simple answer is, of course. Anything that has a caloric contribution to your body can potentially cause you to store more body fat, because your body can take any kind of food and store it as fat. But the real question is, how likely is that to happen? And the answer to that is probably not terribly likely. And the reason is because, again, your ability to have a healthy benefit from a food or to gain fat from a food isn't inherent in the actual food itself. It's in your body's relationship to that food. Specifically, how likely are you to actually use that food that you just ate? So if you ate something and your body's like, I got nothing for this, I can't possibly use this, you're probably going to be much more likely to store it as fat, regardless of what it is. But the opposite's also true. If you consume something and your body's like, oh dude, I could totally use this, you're probably going to have a healthier relationship with it, get more benefit, and you're probably not going to store it as fat. And again, it doesn't matter what it is. But when you look at protein's like the Swiss Army knife, the multi-toolbox of the nutrition world. We use it for everything, from recovery, from building, to just general operations of the human body. So when you consume protein, the chances of your body saying, I can't use this for anything, are pretty slim. However, there are a couple of influences that can tip it more towards the other side. One is just general size and physical activity level are. So the smaller you are and the more sedentary you are, the less likely you can utilize that protein for things. Another one is how quickly and how much protein you're using. Now, this isn't much of a big problem if you're getting your protein primarily from natural whole foods. Same thing with carbohydrates. Typically, Mother Nature's got our back with this. It's going to say, okay, I'm going to give you sugar, I'm going to give you carbs, I'm going to give you protein and fats, but I'm going to package it in ways that it's not going to overload your system too much unless you go to real extreme endeavors. So, like, I don't know of anybody who's gained too much weight from eating fruit. I don't know anybody who's gotten fat from eating too much steak or beans and rice sort of thing, right? Because of the natural qualities of these things from a protein's perspective. But of course, as we know from carbohydrates, where we can potentially run into problems is the processed sources of these things. Processed carbohydrates, a big gulp of soda has more sugar than like a bushel of apples or something, right? So it'd be almost impossible to sit down and get fat from eating a ton of apples because you got fiber and other things attached to it. But when you process it and you weed out just the sugar and carbohydrate, now it's very easy to overconsume carbohydrate. And the same thing may potentially be said for protein, because now we've got protein in processed forms all over the place. We got protein shakes, we've got protein supplement to everything. I swear, we could probably add protein to heroin and crack cocaine and people are like, great, now it's a health food, right? Because that seems to be the way we look at protein these days, is fat for some people sets them off a little bit, carbohydrates and sugar, yeah. But protein seems to be that thing that can do no wrong, that if anything, we're all saying you've got to get more of it. You can never get too much of it. But remember, it's never good or bad or healthy or unhealthy. It's all about how fast are you consuming it versus how fast are you utilizing it. And you're probably not going to overconsume it if your consumption is primarily from natural sources, both for fat, protein, and carbohydrate. But when you're consuming a lot of it from processed sources, your chances of overconsumption go up substantially. I'm not saying don't do an occasional protein shake, and I don't like protein and all that, powders and stuff like that. I'm just saying, get most of your proteins from whole natural foods. It tastes a lot better, it satisfies better, your body can use it better. Everything about you want from food is going to be better from natural foods. Supplements to me have always been like a cheap knockoff of food. So use it as a supplement. That's the term right there. Occasionally, here and there, but get it mostly from whole foods. And remember my 3 Ps: plant, protein, and portion. Protein is in there, right? If you're looking at each of your main meals and saying, where's my protein source? If you're getting a good source of protein at every single meal, you're probably going to get enough, and you're probably not going to get too much. You're going to be right in that sweet spot, and you don't have to count grams or anything like that. If you want more, just increase your portion size. It's just that simple. All right, question number 2, can endurance athletes still build muscle? Now, I understand where this one's coming from because a lot of endurance athletes are typically characterized as being lean, skinny, maybe even scrawny kind of individuals who may not be building very much muscle or have much muscle to begin with. And this is something I know for my own experience because I've always been an endurance athlete myself. I'm a big-time biker, especially mountain biker. I was a bike racer for over 16 years, and I go backcountry skiing and hiking and all this stuff. In fact, the foundation of my physical activity is still very much cardio-based. But we've got this stigma out there that endurance athletes are skinny and scrawny, they are not able to build muscle, which of course is not true because we never lose the physiological ability to adapt and make our muscles bigger and stronger under any circumstances, short of some sort of a physiological condition or disease that prevents you from doing so. But I don't care how old you are, what body type you are, you could be the worst hard gainer in the world. Everybody has the ability to adapt their muscles to strength training of any kind. But there's this idea that endurance athletes can't build muscle because they tend to be very lean and lanky. There's several reasons for this. One is most of their time and energy is just spent doing endurance activities. If you want to make a muscle bigger and stronger, you have to do strength training. And when you've spent 5, 6, 7 hours on the bike, you don't have a whole lot of time and energy left over for a bunch of heavy squat workout. 2 is a lot of endurance athletes just don't do strength training at all, which is, in my opinion, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make because it leaves you set up for more injury, it decreases your performance, and you're leaving a lot of your ability to perform at your best on the table. That's the big mistake I made back in college. Way too much cardio, not nearly enough time strength training, especially in the off season. So from my experience, when I got out of college, I put on muscle at a relatively quick rate right afterwards due to several factors. 1, I was 24 years old. 2, I'd never done really any strength training in my life. 3, I had access to weights and strength equipment for the first time in my life. And 4, I stopped having a restricted diet. I just basically ate however I wanted to. And all of that created this perfect storm where I was able to go from a very skinny endurance athlete to building about 15 to 20 pounds of muscle in about a year, which was pretty darn fast. That's not bad at all. But I was still an endurance athlete. I was still racing. Not nearly as seriously, but I was still racing, I was still riding, I was still doing everything, but I was taking some of those resources and putting them more towards strength training. And the final question is, how important is that whole mind-muscle connection thing as we're getting older? Should we focus on it more or less? This is a great question. I love this question because it's probably way more important as we get older. And this goes back down to the idea that tension control is a physiological habit. Remember, the tension in your muscles is controlled by your brain, and your brain is a habit-forming machine. So as we get older, we've got a lot of time behind us of how we've habitually used our muscles, both with activation or neglect. So a lot of times when people get older and they get these aches and pains and stuff, it's not necessarily because they're older, it's because, well, you've been on the bike or you've been sitting at a desk for the past 20 years. Some of the muscles that you used to engage back when you were playing rugby back in college or whatever, some of those things have gotten a lot of misuse or neglect, and they've just kind of gone to sleep, which creates imbalances and all sorts of aches and pains. And now you're noticing it at the age of 45, but it's not because you're 45, it's because of something that's been going downhill ever since you got out of school. It's kind of like when a part on a machine breaks and you're driving along and suddenly a belt or something pops and you're like, it just broke. It's like, no, it's been breaking for the past 5 years. It's just, this is the straw that broke the camel's back, and now you notice it. And it's the same exact thing with your muscles is, oh, my back hurts, my knees hurt or something. This is the result of a process that's been going on for a long time. And your ability to control tension, that mind-muscle connection, has been eroding in certain muscles over time. And it doesn't matter if you're working out. It doesn't matter what exercises you were doing, because exercises don't control muscle tension. Your brain controls it. So you may have, in fact, in many ways, the exercises could contribute to the lack of tension control due to the habitual conditioning. So if you were doing, for example, squats, and you were all about using your quads during your squats, but never your glutes, and then all of the other exercises you did were sitting down, your glutes are basically sleeping beauty the whole time. And it doesn't matter if it was supposed to use your glutes, because your brain has amazing compensatory habits. It can say, well, we got to lift this weight. Let's use the muscles we're best in touch with. What about glutes? What the hell are glutes? I don't know glutes. Let's not use the glutes. Why? How would we even use that? So you're not going to use it. So these discrepancies get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So the bottom line is, yes, your mind-muscle connection is something you should definitely always be striving to improve, regardless of your training age or your actual biological age. But as you get older, it's even more important to be aware of these discrepancies and where your mind-muscle connection is kind of letting off a little bit. The downside to all this thing is you don't know what muscles are asleep until something breaks, because you can't feel them. You're not aware of using them. That's the whole point, is they're going to sleep. So when you're doing your exercises, you're assuming they're working. And then later on down the road, you've got some sort of ache, pain, or injury. And now you got to come back from that because it's been asleep. And then it's almost not so much too late, but you got a long hill to climb back up. Versus if you preemptively go to an MET specialist, or you just pay attention to how you're using all of the muscles in your leg during squats and stuff, then you can say, oh, wow, I didn't really feel it too much in this muscle. This one's asleep. You can get ahead of it and that way avoid those sort of things. It's like preemptive maintenance on your car. You know, you fix the timing belt before it blows and destroys the whole engine. All right, if you want to learn more about the tension control, check out the tension control chain training ebook that I've got down below for free. Or of course, you can check out my books, Smart Bodyweight Training, which has the updated chapter on chain training, and of course, Grind Style Calisthenics, which has a specific tension control component in every single workout. Thank you very much for your attention, thoughts, and questions down below. And if you're listening to this, of course, on your podcast directory of choice, 5-star reviews and stuff, greatly appreciated. Talk to you next week. Be fit, live free.